and welcome everyone to our November Network to Learn event hosted by the Chamber of Commerce in Pine City and partnering with the City of Pine City. Leslie Sauter is a fabulous community development director here in Pine City and brought this connection to the Chamber, introduced me to Sue, and our community has really been talking about succession planning as we're looking for tools and resources to provide to our business community. And this just really felt like the right fit. So we're excited to have Sue here with us today from the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership. And thank you and all of your participants for joining us. If you're on today's meeting, we are using our group chat function to introduce all of the people that are in attendance. So if you can pop into the chat at the bottom of your screen and let us know who you are, what company you're with, but also use this as a tool if you have questions as we're going through the presentation today. Write in your questions, and then I'll be presenting those to Sue and the team as we pause for questions throughout the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to you, Sue, to get us started, and thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us. I appreciate being able to connect with you and Leslie and have the opportunity to talk to the people in your region. I am the executive director, obviously that slide says that. Let's just go on to the next one, for the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership. And we are a nonprofit, and our purpose really is to be a hub of information and resources around employee ownership in Minnesota. So all forms of employee ownership, and we want to educate and provide those resources to business owners as they start to build a strategy around an exit plan. And part of that reason too is because it's estimated that 2.4 million businesses in the US are owned by baby boomers, and 60% of those business owners will look to sell in the next 5 to 7 years. And the majority of those owners will ultimately sell their company to a private equity firm or perhaps to a competitor. And this often leads to job losses and company moves, closures, which directly impacts the employees, the community, the local tax base, and all because business owners really didn't know of their options. And private equity is always an option when an owner is looking to sell, but we want to make sure that everyone has all the options out there to be able to make a really good decision that's best for them as an owner and for their employees and their community. So our theme is, as a business owner, what will be your legacy? We're going to go over two forms of employee ownership today. One is the ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan, and the other is a worker cooperative, which is different than your grocery cooperative. So we're going to have an opportunity to kind of share how that is a little bit different. And as Becky said, please, post your questions. We're going to stop after each segment and let you ask questions and have a dialogue with you, even though we aren't able to be in person. So I'm going to turn it over to the speakers to introduce themselves briefly. And Ben, we'll start with you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for listening in. I'm Ben Holder. I'm the president and CEO of Plastic Products Company, and happy to be joining and talking to you today.
Bob?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. I'm Bob Hartman. I'm a partner at the Ballard Spahr law firm in Minneapolis. And I have been working with ESOPs for about 40 years in various aspects, and I'm happy to be here to visit with you on that topic today.
And unfortunately, Bob's firm would not allow him to download Rink Central, so that's why you only get to see his picture today, but you'll get to hear his voice for sure. Tom?
And I'm Tom Crouse. You can call me Tom Cruise if you want, but I might not respond. I'm the sales manager over here at Happy Earth Cleaning Service, which is an eco-friendly cleaning company based in Minneapolis. And I was also a founding member of our cooperative, which means I played an outsized role in transitioning the old Happy Earth LLC into our new co-op.
Great, thank you. So we're going to start off the presentation with Bob talking about what is an ESOP. And we put more detail into this presentation so that you'd have something that you could keep afterwards for questions. But we're just going to give an overview of what an ESOP is. And if you want to go to a deeper level, certainly Bob's available for that. And we also have a document that he wrote that goes a little deeper about ESOPs. But right now, we just want to give you kind of the overview of what they're all about. So Bob, I'll let you begin.
Sure. An ESOP is a form of retirement plan that has been with us now for several decades, and was created when ERISA was formed in the early 70s. It operates much like other retirement plans, and business owners are typically familiar with pension plans and 401k plans and profit sharing plans. An ESOP is governed by the same rules as these other plans. It is governed by the Internal Revenue Service and the Department of Labor, but it has some unique characteristics that the other types of plans do not have. It is designed to invest primarily in company stock, and it is also able to borrow money to buy company stock from its shareholders, from its owners. So those features make the ESOP a unique type of plan. And Sue has a better grasp on the number of ESOPs that exist, but there are thousands and thousands of ESOPs in our country that have operated for many years. Some are being adopted each year. And it is a function of transition, typically transition of ownership. And it is the type of plan that can provide significant tax benefits to the selling shareholders and to the company once the ESOP is adopted. For those of you, for smaller companies who operate as an S corporation, ESOPs are permitted to operate in S corporation entities. And the benefit then is that the earnings of the company are not taxed, because the shareholder of 100% S corporation ESOP is tax exempt. And so if a company earns $200 or $500 or $1 million a year, those earnings remain in the corporate till and can be used for capital expenditures, for plant expansion, for hiring new employees. And so that is a tremendous tax benefit that is enjoyed by our ESOP clients and those ESOP companies throughout the country. We represent about 90 ESOP companies of all different sizes, from small, modest companies to some very large companies in all types of industries. ESOPs are not necessarily industry focused. Ben Holder will talk in a few minutes about plastic products and the type of company that he manages. But we represent companies, manufacturers, distributors, professional service companies, engineers, architects. We represent an accounting firm. And it's really a function of the goals of the owners, what they want to do with their company. And as Sue mentioned, the legacy that they wish to provide to their companies. And so I'll give you just a thumbnail of a typical ESOP company that I have represented over the years, and the kind of the fact pattern that is fairly common. It would be a 65-year-old business owner who started the business 30 or 40 years earlier, has grown it, has been successful. The owner is very appreciative of the hard work that his employees have undertaken to help him grow his business. And now he's come to the point where a transition is in order. He doesn't have a son or daughter who's in the business who would be a likely candidate to continue operations. And so he considers the next step. As Sue mentioned, there are companies out there looking to buy successful companies, private equity companies, and other companies in the same industry that this company operates. But his thought process kind of goes as follows. I built this business. I'm in this community. I'm a big part of the community, Pine City or otherwise. And if I sell this company to a private equity firm, or maybe even to another firm in my industry, the likelihood that it's going to remain in this community and continue to retain my employees may be at risk. And likewise, my legacy in starting and running this business may be gone. And so I'd like to consider having my employees own the business through an ESOP structure. And at that point, the business owner engages advisors, financial advisors, legal advisors to assess the value of his business and determine whether an ESOP structure is feasible and whether it can work. And if that conclusion is that yes, it can work, and that the estimated value of the company is something that the business owner is satisfied with, then he would begin the process of establishing an ESOP, engaging the professionals that are required to do an ESOP transaction, which would include a trustee of the ESOP, typically a corporate trustee, and the trustee's advisors, financial and legal, and the business owner's own advisors, his own financial advisor, maybe a CPA firm, along with his attorney. And the ESOP would be established. Again, it's a retirement plan. It's a plan document. And then negotiations would take place between the business owner and his advisors as sellers, and the trustee and the trustees team as buyers. The trustee is acting as a fiduciary on behalf of the employees of the company, who will be the participants in the ESOP and for whom the benefit of the ESOP will accrue. And those negotiations need to be on an arm's length basis. And ordinarily they are congenial, my experiences, the congenial, but business-like negotiations. The parties on both sides are intent on completing a transaction that is in the best interest of all parties, the selling shareholders, the ESOP participants, the employees, and to whom the benefit will ultimately accrue, along with the community where the business is located, which will continue to employ those individuals. And now they would become ultimately owners of the company. That is a segue into Plastic Products Company, which Ben is going to describe in just a minute. When I was hired by the trustee of that company's ESOP several years back, it was the determination of the founder's widow, to sell the remaining shares that she and her family owned to the ESOP that had been established some years earlier. And she was very intent on maintaining her company in that community, Lindstrom, Minnesota. And so we did a transaction. In that transaction, I represented the trustee. I did not represent the company. The transaction was very successful and actually developed a good relationship with the CEO of the company, Ben Holder's predecessor. And after it was concluded, he hired me and my law firm to assist them going forward, and they've been a wonderful client ever since. So that's kind of a real life example of a business owner desiring to keep her business in her community so that her legacy and that of her family would continue. So with that, I will entertain any questions that you may have about how ESOPs work, what they may mean to you and to your community. And as Sue mentioned, I've done a short memo that will be available after this presentation that'll get into some specific details that may be of interest to you as you kind of explore how ESOPs operate. So with that, I will open the session to any questions you may have.
So, Becky, were there any questions in the chat room as of right now?
Not currently anything in the chat box.
Okay. I was going to mention when Bob said something about the ESOPs. There are approximately 6,500 ESOPs in the country. And that was according to data in 2017. And there were 450 worker cooperatives, which is only about 0.1% of the estimated 6 million privately held companies. So that's why we really feel the urgency and the timing to explore employee ownership to grow that in America. So if there are no questions, then we can turn it over to Ben at Plastic Products.
Great, thank you, Sue, and thank you, Bob, for providing some history of how we became 100% ESOP. And you're absolutely correct; it's gone very well since we went 100% almost 7 years ago. Let me tell you a little bit about our company first. We were founded in 1962 in Lindstrom, Minnesota, where I'm actually sitting today. And our corporate headquarters is the original garage where our founders started the company, Willard Smith. Mr. Smith was an employee of 3M, and 3M was the first customer, and started molding parts for 3M in 1962. So we've been around a long time. Willard passed away way before his time in 1975, and Marlene took the business over at that point. She was working as a clerk in the business and then inherited the business when Willard passed. And as company lore goes, when Marlene said to Willard as he was ready to pass away, what am I supposed to do, Smitty? And he said, bite off more than you can chew and chew like hell. And that's basically what Marlene did. And she took over in 75. We were basically a one facility company with about 4 million in sales. She kept following her customers, cutting a swath down through the Midwest into the Southeast. And today we're 10 plants, nearly 1,000 employee owners, and our sales are approaching $200 million. So it's a great American success story. And Marlene's actually in the Minnesota Businesswomen's Hall of Fame. So it's a great story. And I'll tell you a little bit more later about some additional ways that she's still recognized in the community. We went 30% ESOP in 1989. And then as Bob mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, we became 100% in 2013. And you're probably sitting out there wondering, well, why would Marlene do that? Well, she did that for a lot of the reasons that Bob outlined. I think she wanted to make sure her legacy was left in place. Probably more important than her legacy, though, was she cared very deeply about her employees. She was known to loan money to employees to get them through hard times and help them out in any way that she could. And she wanted to make sure they had a long-term retirement plan. There was already a 401k in place, but she wanted to make sure there was something extra that allowed her employees to have a piece of the pie. And also, I think she wanted those employee owners to carry on the culture that she had created, which revolves heavily around the customer, taking care of each other every day and doing everything you can to get better every day. And Marlene's philosophy was, if you do that, you do those three things, you're probably going to be successful in business. So it seems to have worked pretty well. I think it's that mentality that has allowed us to, our business to continue to flourish today and continue to grow. Our ESOP today, it's really alive and flourishing, and I've got several examples there of these are sort of key performance indicators that we monitor to make sure our culture is flourishing. We have 22 ESOP committee members. That's 2 for each of our 10 facilities and for our corporate headquarters, plus we've got some charter members. And basically those committee members do some education ongoing. We spend a lot of time educating our employees about their ESOP. Obviously, new people come in, need to understand the ESOP, but we also keep educating people that have been here for 30 years plus. We have a quarterly newsletter. We do monthly education emails. We focus a lot on employee engagement, which is all about us getting better each and every day. And you'll see I've got an acronym there, FABW, and that stands for Find a Better Way, which is very important in any business, but it's particularly important in the plastics manufacturing business. Basically, our employees on the plant floor work with our engineers, and we find projects where we can either reduce scrap, improve quality, pull other costs out of the product so we can stay competitive in the marketplace. And it's that kind of employee engagement that keeps us improving and getting many favorable compliments from our customers. October was Employee Ownership Month. We had a blast celebrating this past month, even with the challenges of social distancing and masking and all the other things that we have to do because of the pandemic. But again, it was a great example of how alive and how excited our people are about being employee owners. And then every year we do a share price video. So our fiscal year just ended at the end of October. We'll announce our new share price in February, and we actually put a video together, and then we go on a month or two later and actually hold shareholder meetings around the country, which will be a challenge this year. I don't think we're going to be able to do them in person. We normally do them in person, but that's just some of the things about how our ESOP operates today. And it's all of this that just keeps everything going that Marlene wanted to keep going. Keep that culture growing, take care of customers, take care of each other, and get better every day. Now you can say, how do you know your ESOP is working? Well, since we went 100% ESOP 7 years ago, our share price is up 269%. That's almost mind-boggling to most of us here to look at that these days. And it's great, but it also has a little bit of a downside in that some of our longer-term employees, because the share price is so high, decided to retire a year or two early. And that's great, right? I mean, if people want that package and if they feel like they go sooner, then go spend their life in retirement. I think that's great. I think the other thing that indicates that our ESOP is working pretty darn well is that Marlene, back in 2015, the city of Lindstrom put up a statue at the end of town for Marlene to recognize her efforts and contributions to the community. And the statue actually stands in the shadow of a water tower here in Lindstrom. I don't know if you've ever been here, but it's in the shape of a Swedish coffee pot. And it was in a state of disrepair many years ago, and Marlene took it upon herself to restore it, and we still maintain it every year. But I'm sure if you go look at that statue, she's going to be smiling because the ESOP is alive and flourishing. Her legacy is continuing, and there are a lot of happy employee owners. I'm a big believer that ESOPs work. This is probably maybe the 5th company I've been involved with in nearly 40 years in the plastics business. I've never seen this level of employee involvement and ownership and what's going on in the business. It's amazing to me, and you can't convince me otherwise. If you get 1,000 people engaged, that business is going to grow and it's going to do good for years to come. No question in my mind. That's Plastic Products ESOP story. Any questions that I could answer?
Ben, I don't have anything in the chat box. I'm curious, you've got 10 different plants. How many employees do you have across those 10 locations? We have
about 1,000.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of folks out there, and they're hard to find today, by the way. We look at, that's another thing that I think is an advantage of being an ESOP, is that it's a little bit of a recruiting tool. because we can say to prospective employees, yeah, we pay competitive wages, you get, we have a 401k, but you also get ownership in the company. And I'll say it, and I know Bob said it, but these shares are given to the employees. They don't pay for them. So every year they're given shares based on a percentage of their compensation. So if somebody makes $50,000 a year and the contribution level is 10%, that means they're given $5,000 worth of stock. That's hard to find. You really can't find it other than in an ESOP. Good question.
Michael popped in here with a question for you as well. What was the most difficult part in your decision to go to an ESOP?
You know, that I came in right when the transaction was done, but I know some of the history. And I think the struggle, I think, was more family related in terms of some family members wanted to go the ESOP route, some wanted to go another route. So I think that was a struggle in trying to convince the group that an ESOP was the way to go. I think that was, we already had been an ESOP for, over 30 some years. So we kind of knew how it worked, but now when you get to that point where you're giving up your majority ownership and all of your ownership, that brought into play. And I think a fair amount of businesses might be this way if family members are still involved as a primary shareholder. I don't know if Bob could add something to that at all. Bob, do you recall anything from that time that was challenging?
Yeah, I do, Ben. In addition to Marlene, there were 4 siblings. There were 4 children, and some of the children were in the business, and some of the children were not in the business. And the attachment that they had to the company, varied by sibling, and what they expected the future of the business to be, as well as their own, financial well-being. So I think there was a fair amount of debate on the shareholder side, on the family side, as to what's the best course of action for the company. And I think after they had analyzed what they wanted for the company employees, the consensus was reached that going 100% ESOP really did make a lot of sense to each of the children as well as to Marlene. And it was a successful company back in 2013. And as you mentioned, it's a bigger and better company today because of good management, continued employee involvement. I mean, I don't think I have any clients that have that many members on their ESOP committees as do Plastic Products, Ben. So, and when I've had conversations with the siblings on occasion, I think they are very happy with the decision that was made, and that the company remains a very significant part of the community.
The family members were sold on that. And I remember my predecessor, Rick Carlson, who was Marlene's oldest son, he passed away suddenly about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. The last thing he said to me when I saw him was nothing to do about profit or operations or any of those things. He said the most important thing you can do is keep this company ownership culture alive. He said that's the most important thing to focus on. And I thought about that a little bit. And now as each and every day goes by, it makes perfect sense to me. So I'm personally invested in making sure it does stay alive, and it starts at the top and works its way down. Other questions at all?
There was one thing I was going to add, and Bob, you may want to address this too. Ben, you have 1,000 employees over 10 locations, but an ESOP also is going to work for a company that has 50 employees. So I don't, I want people to know that there's a span there of when it works for having an ESOP. They don't have to be a large company.
Yeah, no question there, Sue. As I think of all the companies I know in the ESOP community, they run the gamut. From 30 to 40 employees up to, even more than we've got. I mean, there's some ESOPs that are much bigger than us. And yeah, you're absolutely right. it can work for a lot of different sized organizations. I know, I think it was last year, I went to the University of Pennsylvania does an ESOP CEO program, and there were 11 other CEOs there, or soon to be CEOs. We were the largest, and I think the next largest might have been 100 employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting to see that kind of range.
Right. So oh, go ahead, Becky, did you want to say
There's
something?
just a follow-up question from Michael. ESOP seems like a fantastic idea, but why are there so few of them in our country, relatively speaking?
Because it's the best kept secret in America. That's why. And that's why we exist, because we want to get that education piece out there, that there are options and people should be looking at it. And that would be my answer to that. And Bob, you could certainly respond as well.
Yeah, even that's a good question. You know, if it was so great, why hasn't everybody done it?
Yeah.
And you know, I don't have the precise answer, as Sue said. It's not a well-known concept. I mean, for those of us who live and work in the ESOP community, you know, we know it. We've known it for years and years, and I think that's the function of the Minnesota CEO that Sue heads, is to kind of spread the word and let people know that this is a tool that may be appropriate for many companies who haven't considered an ESOP as a transition tool. Certain characteristics, and back to Ben's point, Ben has a large company. We represent companies with as few as ESOP companies with as few as 15 employees, and revenues that may be in the low millions of dollars. And so the notion that an ESOP may be appropriate or may not be appropriate sometimes bears some examination. Right. It is not an inexpensive project to do an ESOP, because as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of professionals that need to be part of the transaction, and so that can be expensive. And if it's too small a company in revenue and profit and maybe employee size, and doing an ESOP may be simply not feasible. And that's why at the front end you do that analysis. Are you a good candidate? And to my mind, a good ESOP candidate is one that is a profitable company, that has good prospects going forward, that has a good and stable workforce, that has an employee count. The 15 employee company is pretty small. There's some special tax rules that make ESOPs maybe not feasible for really small companies. But if a company has 25 to 50 employees, 25 to 75 employees, I would say that reflects a good number of the ESOP companies that we represent. They're profitable. They have good growth prospects. They have a good management team. They have a solid customer base. And in other words, it's the kind of company that makes it attractive to a buyer. And when you do an ESOP transaction, the ESOP trustee is the buyer, just like a private equity company would be a buyer, or a competitor would be a buyer. You want to have a successful company with a good story to tell about why you're a good company. So that's kind of what I see.
Yeah, I think Sue's dead on too. The word needs to get out there. Bob, I think everything you're saying makes sense. It's not right for every business owner. You know, it's not the right decision. I think if we educate more and you look at the advantages that ESOPs bring and educate people more, I think more and more you're going to see owners wanting to go this route. But again, you do that analysis and you just figure out what's what's right for you. And it has a lot to do with your company culture, right? What kind of culture do you have? Are the employees involved? Are they not involved? Those kinds of things.
And I think that's a good segue into, talking about the next form of employee ownership, a worker cooperative, where an ESOP is more of a retirement plan. A worker cooperative is when people are creating wealth equity while they're working within a company. So let's turn it over to Tom and let's get some information about worker cooperative. Then we can come back and do some comparison between the two at the end. So Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, I will take it away. Thank you everyone for being here today. Now we're going to switch over to something slightly different and talk a little bit about worker cooperatives. And just a quick reminder, I'm the sales manager over here at Happy Earth Cleaning, and I played a big role in establishing our cooperative at the beginning of this year and throughout last year. And so just to start, it's important to mention that a worker cooperative is jointly owned and governed by its employees. As Sue mentioned at the beginning, you might have heard of one of the more common forms of cooperatives in this state is the grocery cooperative. And in almost all cases, they are a consumer-owned cooperative, which means you, as someone who potentially shops there, is welcome to and has the opportunity to buy into that cooperative if you want to. In a worker cooperative like Happy Earth, only the employees are afforded that opportunity. And again, they get to choose whether they want to or not, but it is only employees, not our customers or not the general public, who are welcome to buy into our cooperative. And so those ownership and voting rights that come with buying into the cooperative are generally acquired by working in the business, i.e. being an employee, and paying a membership fee. There's a lot of flexibility in how you might want to structure it. For example, we at Happy Earth decided to set our buy-in amount at $1,000, which really isn't that much because we wanted it to be accessible to even our entry-level employees. But it's also enough so that it is still kind of a serious decision, and it helps implant in their brain the idea that yes, you are buying into a business and you are subject to some liabilities and also some of the profits, because the profits are shared with the workers who have bought into the cooperative. They benefit from their labor and from the success of the company. And so there's no ownership group at the top of a cooperative. The owners are the employees who have chosen to buy in. We generally refer to those employees as member owners. So if you hear me use that phrase again, that's what I'm talking about, employees who have bought into the co-op. This can be a very feasible exit strategy for business owners in virtually any industry that does not restrict ownership to licensed professionals. So something I'll mention about Happy Earth is that we're really not very big. We're only about 18 or 19 employees. And it can work for larger businesses as well. Transforming into a cooperative is not giving your business to the employees, it's selling your business to the employees. So it looks a lot like selling your business any other way, except there's a little bit of extra communication and training, especially in the part of the ownership group that's transitioning out, and for the employees who are the initial ones that might buy in right at the beginning, especially if they're going to be expected to govern the cooperative after the transition. You're going to want to get them some training in business or other legal things or any areas where they might have any gaps in knowledge before that transition happens. And as a part of that training also, each worker cooperative gets to decide what the structure will look like. There are certain establishing documents of a cooperative, things like bylaws and the decision matrix that have a lot of flexibility. There are certain things that need to be in the bylaws and the decision matrix, but exactly how those things look is up to not only the current owners of the business, but those employees who are looking at taking over ownership. For example, one of the things to consider when establishing your cooperative is how do you share the profits among those employees who are buying in? We at Happy Earth decided it would be most fair to have it based on the number of hours worked. So far this year, my general manager has definitely been putting in her 40 hours a week or more. Myself as the sales manager, especially when we were shut down for a couple of months earlier this year, I haven't been as essential to the operations of the company, so my hours have been a little lighter. And at the end of this year, if we do realize any profits as a company, which still looks feasible even despite the difficult year that it's been, I will probably have just slightly less profits as a part of my take home compared to my general manager because she kind of worked that much more. And we thought that would be fair. But there's flexibility if you want to have it be equal no matter what between all workers. That's something you can do based on position or seniority. Maybe upper level management receives slightly more profits. That's something you could set up. Or you could have it be based on tenure or the seniority or how long somebody has been with the company, and possibly even more options. And this is just one example of one decision you'll be making about establishing your co-op. And there's flexibility in almost all decisions and all ways that you might establish the co-op. All right, another decision that you kind of have some flexibility in deciding when transitioning to a cooperative is how exactly the business should be governed. There are general better practices for co-ops that tend to work better, but the flexibility for your business culture or to match your employee ownership group is still there. A lot of times it'll be one worker owner gets one vote on all major decisions. That is very common, but again, there's some flexibility there. You can also delegate specific decisions to an individual or a committee. We at Happy Earth didn't do that because we're a little smaller, so we don't even really have enough employees to form a committee of a specific department. But if you're a little larger, you know, there might be a marketing committee of worker owners who focus specifically on those initiatives and report on the progress to the board or the other member owners. The bylaws are a very crucial document. It's like the constitution of your cooperative. They're going to outline the correct processes for addressing issues or creating new initiatives. And that's why you want to have your bylaws done in advance. It's why they're core to your cooperative, because you don't want to decide how to make decisions or create new initiatives while you're in the thick of it, while it's already underway. You want to have these things in place before you encounter any new issues or create any new initiatives. And so that's where the bylaws are really important. And that's the document where you have a lot of flexibility to decide how exactly the cooperative is going to match to fit your current business culture or the pieces of your culture that you really want to preserve going forward. And for most co-ops, it really is best to have not only a board of directors, but also preserve your management group and then have both of those parties working in unison with all of the employee owners who run the co-op. One thing I'll mention real quick is that the board of directors must be made up of member owners. Sometimes you can have outside experts. You could leave a seat open for regular employees who have not bought into the co-op also. But for the most part, the employee owners make up the board of directors, and they also vote on the board of directors. So this trio of three entities between the board, the management, and the full group of employee owners kind of represents our three branches of government. And there are checks and balances between all of these groups that sort of help them make decisions and proposals, and that's also why a decision matrix is very important. And this is sort of the best summary of the little bit of extra work that's required when selling your business to a cooperative. Most people don't even consider it because they think it's too much work. And realistically, it's a little bit more communication and a little bit more training. Otherwise, it's kind of a straightforward sale after you have established your board and your management and those employees who want to become owners. Okay, so the best way, or I should say, here's how it works at Happy Earth. And if you really don't know too much about co-ops, this is a really good path to exploring your transition. First, I'll say what you want to do is get in touch with MNCEO. We'll give you some free consultations. You might even have a conversation with me for free just to help and see if co-op might be a good fit. And if you want to explore it further, we can plug you into our network of trained professionals, and they can really help map out your transition to a worker cooperative structure. So they are consultants that you will want to work with for a certain period of time just to make sure the co-op you're establishing not only reflects your business culture, but is also like legal and feasible in the eyes of the state of Minnesota. We did use a business loan from a community financial institution called Shared Capital, who invests exclusively in cooperatives. They don't resemble traditional lenders in any way, and they're more like financial allies for us. There are strange hidden benefits like that to becoming a cooperative. The community is suddenly very invested in making sure you survive. And so we only had 5 employees buy into the company. They weren't responsible for paying the full value that the business was worth, which is way more than we could have afforded. And this loan actually financed the transition. And then our buy-in is helping to finance that. And our owner could have chosen to stay on as an executive or transition the business slowly. If you're an owner, you can stay on as a worker employee. And so there are some options there. If you don't want to transfer or transition 100% all at once, you can stay on as an employee owner for a few years and really help make sure everything's on course as you establish the cooperative. It's also good practice if you do leave as an owner and exit from the company to serve on the board for a year or two, again, to help smooth out that transition. Again, after the transition, it leads to an increase in profits and productivity as employees have a real stake in the game. I can attest to that. We haven't even had a ton of employees, maybe 3 or 4 of them have shown interest in becoming owners since we transitioned earlier this year. It's been kind of a hard and weird year. So the numbers are a little lower than we expected, but even employees who haven't expressed to us that they're considering buying into the cooperative seem to have more concern for the health of the overall business than employees we've had in the past. So I have to think that's due to our cooperative structure. And then as far as the loan that we still have outstanding, we have some flexibility to sort of pay that back over the next 5 or 10 years as we continue operating as a profitable business. So we don't have to pay the owners the full value of the business all up front. You can get a loan, you can do financing plans, you can transition slowly. Again, there's a ton of flexibility in transitioning to the co-op in terms of the finances. And then real quick, I'll walk you through Happy Earth's co-op story just to give you an example, a real life example of how this can work. So we actually began exploring our cooperative structure in 2018 as a way to sell the business while preserving our unique business culture. Unlike much of the cleaning industry, we're actually heavily invested in our employees. We pay fair, livable wages and provide a lot of benefits and really provide a very inclusive and supportive work environment that involves a lot of training and development. And we didn't want that to disappear just because our old owners wanted to leave and move back to their home state of Washington. And the idea of selling to a firm or a competitor really made us all nervous that everything that made Happy Earth special would go away with those new owners. And so we viewed a cooperative not only as a viable business plan, but also a way of preserving everything that we loved about Happy Earth. We did spend a while researching options. MNCEO didn't exist when we were looking at this back in 2018. So you can kind of skip this step. We spent a year researching options, taking classes, searching for consultants to help us transition to the co-op. You can just contact MNCEO and we can help you do all of that. Throughout 2019, 5 veteran employees, including myself, became what's called the steering committee. And that is the group of employee owners who are invested in establishing the initial cooperative and making sure the transition happens smoothly, and then also playing a role in the governance after the cooperative transition has happened. Employees who plan on staying as member owners after the transition. And we took our time with it. You can do this faster if you want to. We just did like a training a month in the evenings and took our time. So we did spend about a year doing some extra business and financial training for those 5 employees, again, myself included, who were interested in starting a co-op. And again, that's a little bit of extra work on top of selling your business to a firm or a competitor, but it's really kind of worth it if you're invested in your employees or you think you have some very special parts about your culture that you want to preserve. That extra training really wasn't too much. We all agreed to do it unpaid so that it wouldn't be a huge burden on the business because we were interested in learning and training and developing. So part of it also depends on how excited your employees are about that idea, and if you have a core group of individuals willing to undergo that training and learn a little more. And then by the end of 2019, our steering committee had written, believe it or not, we never had a business plan before last year, so we wrote ourselves a business plan so we could get that loan. It was pretty easy because it was already a successful business, so we just kind of had to write down. We wrote out our bylaws, which we could not have done without help from Project Equity and some other consultants. That's definitely an area where I recommend working with some consultants, is composing and writing your bylaws. That's also where we took the opportunity to make sure the co-op reflected everything we wanted to preserve about our culture also. And then we secured our loan from Shared Capital and established our new co-op on January 1st of this year. And one thing I want to say real quick about that is it was a straightforward asset purchase. Happy Earth Cleaning LLC sold all of its assets to the Happy Earth Cleaning Co-op, and that is how the mechanics of the actual transition work.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And then some benefits that I want to mention that I think are very important to point out since we've become a co-op this year. Obviously, you don't need me to say it, 2020 has been very difficult, but I personally believe our ability to survive is because we switched to a co-op structure. I say that partially because our owners who left at the beginning of this year were already feeling kind of burnt out. Even after a relatively normal year like 2019 and the years that led up to it. And I think a prolonged shutdown and the other issues we've had this year might have done them in terms of their ability to keep managing the business. Another piece I'll mention about that is because we have such an amazing lender in Shared Capital, they were able to get us a low interest emergency loan in a matter of days right when we needed it at the beginning of the shutdown earlier this year. That really helped us afloat too, because we have strong financial allies in the community. For sure, our employee turnover has decreased. The cleaning industry averages 200% turnover, if you can believe it. It's kind of a nightmare. Our turnover is more like 30% or lower. And then our community engagement has increased. One thing I want to say is that it used to be our eco-friendly products that we use were our #1 selling point for new customers. And now I'd say it's about 50-50 between eco-friendly and being employee-owned. And the type of customers that we were appealing to with our environmentally friendly initiatives are also really excited about the idea that our employees are owners. And so that makes our whole community support system stronger. We work with our vendors a little smoother. Our customers behave more like allies than business partners. Another thing that happened at the shutdown is we have regular customers who get weekly or monthly cleaning, and we had a number of them who were so concerned that we might disappear and we might have to close down as part of the pandemic that they prepaid for multiple appointments, not knowing ever when or even if we would be able to clean for them again. But they put that money down up front just to make sure we could survive, because we're that special to them, which is kind of amazing. And so we've seen really some increased goodwill. And as I said before, our green practices, our cooperative structure is, I think, tied with our green practices for the #1 reason why customers like us. And then we've also been working on a lot of new training and development for our employees, employee owners. And that's really nice, because it feels like it's not just some job that people have, but it's actually a place where they can come and maybe learn a little bit about how this business actually works, take some lessons on to the rest of their life, if they take another job or advance their careers in another direction. I hope they'll learn something useful here beyond just how to clean.
Thanks, Tom. And I want to, we're closing in on 2 o'clock here, so I want to make sure that we close with anyone who has any questions. The slide that's up now is just talking about some points from the difference between a ESOP and a worker cooperative. But Becky, if you have any additional questions from the audience, we could take those now.
Doesn't look like any have popped in yet, but I'll keep you posted.
So then just quickly, here's some differences between an ESOP and a worker cooperative. And even though they're structured very differently, and one's a retirement plan and one's more for the employees while they work there, I think they both have the same end game. They're creating wealth equity for their employees. The employees are engaged, so they're motivated to do a good job, whether they're in an ESOP or worker cooperative. A worker cooperative, just works well for that small company. Say you're in retail or in a service industry that has few employees. That's a great option for you. And of course, the ESOP as a retirement plan is a great option to look into as well. So I want to make sure we have all the information out here, because we would love for anyone on the session to reach out to MNCEO or to any of the speakers. You can tell from their presentation that they love sharing their story, that they've been successful, and it's a good thing for our communities, our state, and for our country to make all workers employee owners. So I do want to thank you all for attending today, and for Pine City for letting us present to you. And again, we'll just open it up one last time to see if there's any questions.
No questions, but I just want to say thank you. Just listening to both Ben, Tom, and Bob talk about their structures for their companies really makes me think of some of our local businesses who I can totally envision them going one route or the other, because so many of them are passionate about their business and are nearing that retirement age. So thank you for sharing with us today and allowing us the opportunity to record today's presentation so that we can share it with those businesses and let them gain this kind of knowledge to help our small business community.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
All right, with no further questions in the chat, I will close us up today then with one final thank you. And I look forward to an opportunity to connect with some of you again in the future. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Becky.